Hello everyone. I wanted to go ahead and do a tour guide for Tour 10 using the Golf Clash Notebook tool here. So first thing that you're going to see is the way that I set up my bag here is going to be with the extra mile for the driver. You're going to want something with length for this tour. There isn't really going to be many driver shootouts, so you just want to make sure that you can kind of cover yourself a little bit distance wise, because there's going to be a lot of headwinds here that could potentially put you in a tough way. And because of that point with not having the shootouts, I really don't find a need too much for accuracy like quarterback and rock or anything like that. I would just try to stay within your means with a lot of the shots that you make. Other than that, let's take a look at the woods. You can see that I have sniper on. There's no reason to for me to switch unless maybe if my guardian was an 8. I'm not going to do it at a 6 because I think I'm just going to kind of give up too much to kind of make the swap. However, that for this tour, they're almost pretty equal. I'd give the edge to sniper, but it would only be a slight. Even at an 8, I would probably give it kind of like a 45-55 type comparison. It's going to be very, very close, which in the other tours, it's not going to be as close. So there is, since they added the Gokasho Bay holes here, far more holes where high backspin can actually really help you to get it in there tight on some of these par 3s. It's almost half of them. Like all the Gokashos, I really like to have that option because it makes the shots a little bit easier. However, there are workaround shots that we can also hit. Aside from that, you can see that I have the Goliath one. You're going to need, unless your B52 is a 5, you'll need at least 4 backspin because this tour has two iron shootouts. So you need to make sure that you have the length covered to make sure that you can hit it far enough. So if you don't have a B52 5, you'll have to go with Goliath, and probably no other club is going to work. When looking at balls, I'm going to kind of prioritize in this direction: Kingmaker, Katana, Titan. Hopefully you guys are saving up enough of these Kingmakers, because if you've seen anything that I've done in the earlier tours, I haven't used Kingmaker but maybe one time. It's very, very limited with how many I'm going to need. However, for this tour, especially when wind gets up high, I think it can be as high as 18 miles per hour. So being able to reduce that to 11 or 10 is going to really be helpful. And it'll give you an advantage because on so many shootouts, it's going to come down to fractions of a yard. So the difference in 10% wind reduction is going to be pretty huge. Similarly with some of these par 3 shootouts, length could become an issue where you want to have all those yards. So going down to a Katana could be a little bit dangerous, but you also like to have that side spin, especially for some key drives where you want to make sure that you can get it over in good position. So that's pretty much what I'm going to try to focus on here. And let's try to jump in here and do some holes. So one of the things that you'll start to see is you could potentially have matches here where it spins for a long time. So if you want to avoid all the replays, you can start to back out. Oh wow, an epoch 7 already. So it really doesn't matter too much the clubs people have, but I just don't. I mean, this is entirely paid for. Well, not entirely paid for, but it's somewhat paid for. And of course, not a lot of top 10s in there to really get a ton of cards from. And what I try to do, I try to avoid that, and that's the exact reason. I try to avoid the right side of that fairway. There you can see my opponent puts it into the rough. I don't know which account to use here. I don't think I have this account on here. So let's take a look here. As I was mentioning, this is going to be kind of a dangerous shot for me. And what I try to do is I try to get on the the left half of the fairway here. As you can see that I'm setting up to aim. And the biggest reason being, now keep in mind I'm pulling away from min, so I need to make sure. And the biggest reason that I aim for the left half of the fairway is so that it doesn't bend the way that you saw my opponent's. So you can see how mine kind of stays up. I almost got just a little bit too careless with that curl, but you can see that I did hold on to the fairway. If you hit the rough there, you're going to be in trouble. And when you land on the left half of the fairway there instead of the right half, the ball will end up staying up higher. The more right you hit that, the more it just deflects off towards the right. So here you can see my opponent totally got bailed out here. That they just let him go to the green with a straight tailwind. And let's take a look here, see if I can't get this one to drop. I don't have this bag set up, so I got to kind of find the closest account, and that's what I'll try to do, is I'll try to find the closest account. Now what you'll see here is it is a slightly uphill. We're going to be pulling away from max, so I might use a little bit closer to min, somewhere 9.5-ish rings. I'm not going to use the slider, but I'm just going to kind of estimate the zone for myself. So I'm kind of thinking somewhere in here, 9-ish rings. Great ball. Off to kind of a sloppy start here. So this is definitely going to shoot off towards the left, especially with this fairway. Let's see if I can find, because I need to make sure that I have an account with a Goliath 7. Try to make the switch here. Man, let's try this one. Nope. This one? Nope. This one. Still nope. The reason that I don't have this account in here is because I'm out of spots to do so. Definitely not this one. I guess we're going to go with this one. The only problem here is my driver is going to be off. I'm going to have to switch between a couple accounts here. Now, what I'm going to do here is, sometimes I'll go for that bump shot. However, if I can get this to bounce on this fringe here, as you can kind of see that I'm trying to do here, if I can bounce this along the fringe, and it looks like I'm going to run out of time. I know pretty much the adjustment. I'm towards max club, so I'm just going to kind of go for this. I can see that I'm going to need slight power here. So you can see with what I'm trying to do, I'm just trying to bump it into that fringe and get it to run out. You can see anything within 3 or 4 yards, going to be pretty solid overall. I only do that on side winds. On tailwinds, and well, tailwinds sometimes too. It's a lot harder to hit that fringe though, so you might skip it through. So let's take a look here. I do want to just go over what I just did there so you can see it. I think it was 5.4-ish miles per hour. I had some angle on this. So you'll see that I was towards max. I tried to go 6 rings. So relatively flat hole. So here you can see this one comes in just a little bit fast. That's going to be 5 or 6. So you just want to try to play that fringe there, you know, especially with early on clubs, as you'll see that, you know, you can get in there pretty good. Let's keep going. As I mentioned, you know, if the wind's a little bit tougher in direction, I'll just try to go with a headwind or a tailwind. So I won't try to hit that shot. However, when the wind's like that, that's pretty much how I'll try to just kind of take advantage of that hole and still make sure that I don't, you know, cost myself. So here you're going to see, you know, I'm towards max here. I'm just going to do the driver without it because, you know, we already talked about I don't have this bag set up, and you know, for the one time that I'm going to play it, I'm not going to set it up. So I'm just going to kind of slide between a couple bags if I have to. What I'm going to try here is right around 3-ish rings and bring it back. Of course I get a great ball. Why wouldn't I? So it should hang on. It's just going to be a little bit more left edge. Looks like it did. So, you know, what I try to do is position myself kind of towards min wood or max long iron, somewhere in that fashion. And it's always really close and wind dependent. Now, what would I do for that drive? You know, if I was going to set it up for a precision type play, keep in mind this ring play may be just slightly modified, but I at least wanted just to kind of go over kind of what I did. You know, it's kind of like this and using the max number since I'm essentially right at max. And here you can see, you know, we're going to be towards max here in this case as well. I can't tell. It looks almost like pretty straight wind. And we're going to be 4.6 at max. I'm trying to think, do I use top spin here? I think I might. So it's just a little bit short of max, so I'm going to pull just inside that 4.6 rings. And there you can see with just maybe just a little bit more speed, because you can see it was coming in from the left. If I would have just landed just a little bit shorter, might have had a really good chance. So I just got a little bit aggressive on that north edge. But I usually use maybe about a half to 1 bar of topspin depending on wind direction. Since it looked like it might have been a little in the face, that's the reason that I was kind of maybe just cranking it up just a tiny bit higher. So there we are, able to pick up this game. Just, a quick win just by not making mistakes. So, just make sure that you, keep the ball well within your means. Don't try to do too much or risk anything that would potentially, take yourself out of the hole. It's much better to, always keep, whatever you're comfortable with. Do not exceed those limits, especially in Tour 10. This is probably, a lot tougher than it used to be. And here you can see we got straight into the wind, so I'm going to set up just a little bit differently. All I try to do on this one is just kind of put the ball in play. So I'm going to try to focus on kind of this direction. Just going to go ahead and use this, see what it gives me for a ring number. So about 7 rings. So I'm assuming, we're going to be able to kind of max out here and assume that it's going to... Now, I don't want to curl too much here because that left rough's going to start coming into play. So all I'm trying to do is just try to hold the line, get this up in here, and keep it into the fairway somewhere. Just make sure that I don't make a mistake. And I had a feeling that there was no way that I was going to get this too far, for example, because of how severe the wind is straight in the face. Here's an interesting one. Big Topper 5. So would not be my first club of choice, but it will work. I want to know what they were using that for. So Apocalypse 3, my extra mile is going to be relatively similar to that. One of the things that you'll definitely want to be just a little bit careful of is the accuracy. So you got to make sure that you're somewhat on with the way that you go about your shot making. So let's take a look here. We're going to be pulling up towards max, so I'm just going to use the max ring number. You'll also see that I'm just starting below max because I don't want to have to go into overpower. So I'm going to kind of purposely start down here. So that's the first thing that you saw that I did, is I kind of scanned that zone. And I'm kind of thinking, somewhere around here, and I'm going to probably end up around max here. Yep, right at max. So I pushed up to plus 11, which is the last yard I can go. Great ball here. Looks like it's probably going to end up sliding right. But there you can have it. Play your wind effect. Hopefully you can get your perfect balls, unlike me. And you can see up near that 13 rings is relatively spot on. So using the new wind direction, and because what would you have done, in the past? Maybe you'd use 11 rings or 11 and a half just to give it some kind of overplay. But I can tell you that it's, much more significant than you originally would have thought. So you'll see that the new directions are definitely helpful. And a little bit shorter drive made needing to go into overpower there. Two straight headwinds on this hole. No, not exactly fun, but Thankfully, it is one of the shorter par 5s. So let's jump into the shootout here. Of course, Sniper 10 is going to go similar to Sniper, what's mine, a 9, I think I'm using. So it should be essentially almost the exact same, maybe, 0.1 rings different. Very, very little different. Now we are going to be where kind of towards, so we're starting at min, pulling up to maybe almost mid. So I'm thinking, right around 6 rings here. Now what I typically do is try to aim and play wind effect and just kind of play off this slope a little bit. So you can see with how I'm trying to roll it down to the hole, and I'm thinking right around here. And as I mentioned, I typically pull maybe about 1 per ring, which is almost about 40% slider here. So there you can see it's rolling down, not too bad, just a little bit too much on the wind effect that I was off on. But let's just push this in here. Since I was a little bit tight on time, I wanted to show you kind of where I was. I was kind of somewhere up around here. And you could see that I started at min, like I started down here, and I ended up pulling up. So since I'm pulling up rings, I'm making sure that I'm accommodating for that. And the biggest key here is your wind effect. So you can see that I kind of kept the ball guide through the hole. However, it kind of shortened up. So you'll want to make sure that you're considering wind effect, especially in the headwinds. What you'll see is the ball pitch will kind of go at an angle. So you might have it like pitch off more towards the right and check up much more than it kind of shows you on the ball guide. So here's another good shot. We have 2 good ones here. So let's keep going here. Keep grinding. Hole 1. Classic hole. Now there's a couple different ways to play this one. This is maybe one of those holes that might be nice to have a quarterback for. However, with this wind, it wouldn't have done me any good. The first thing that you want to do is make sure that you find the fairway. So you'll want to hit a shot that you're relatively comfortable with. Sometimes I'll go with a hook, a slice hook type approach, and I may do that here. Alternatively, I might not be able to top spin this as much as I want. So you'll see that it'll start to catch up towards that left edge there a little bit if you're not too cautious. So you might have to take off some of the top spin if you just go for kind of that approach. So you have to kind of lay off the distance. But as I was mentioning, if I wanted to kind of hook slice this, I could kind of add a little bit of extra length to it that I wouldn't have been able to otherwise. So I'm thinking somewhere around here. I'm aiming off the right of my bullseye, and I'm assuming that it's going to land at least 3 rings shorter. So I want to make sure that that's accommodated for, and I'm going to probably go somewhere around 6 or 7 rings. See if I can even miss this tree doing this. Yep. So, and as I mentioned, I'll be able to get it much farther down this fairway this way. So that's one of the main reasons that I'll do it this way. Keep in mind that if it was a side wind or a headwind, I would have had to take off some of that backspin. But it does keep me in range. However, you can see with my opponent, you know, especially having the seasoned 5-ball, little extra power, and a tailwind, it's not going to, it doesn't affect him whatsoever. So, you know, with this scenario, I didn't need to drive it that far, but you can never know. So, you know, I'd rather put myself in a situation where I know that I don't have to hit max club and go into overpower, because the wind that they could give me could be a headwind. We just don't know. So what I typically do here is play a little bit more on the cautious side. You know, make sure that you don't make a forced error. First thing that would be nice to do is just kind of scan the zone here. So we are going to be on a Goliath, pulling down towards min a little bit. So somewhere up in here, pulling towards mid. Going to try to keep off the spin here, 5 rings, and just use some curl. 5.5 rings. And just needed just a wee bit more. However, you know, I don't expect to make this one. It's pretty hard to do when you have to use so much curl. That's one of the reasons that I like to play it left, is just so you have a nice straight in view at the hole. So here we're getting this one again, a little bit different wind. Since we have Sniper 9, as I mentioned, you know, we're going to kind of play the same. Keep in mind that I'm going to be pulling down now towards min. So I'm going to need to make sure that I accommodate for that. So I'm going to be pulling down probably towards 15% club. I might start to up the backspin just slightly. And it looks like I was able to get it. So, you know, seeing these two shootouts back to back, the most important thing to know is that you always need to kind of be just changing. But you'll see that I don't use a lot of elevation. If my start zone and my stop zone are kind of very similar in height, I'm not going to use a lot of elevation. However, the important thing to note is I just used kind of maybe 40% on the slider, and then here I just used about 15%. So slider positioning is going to change, but you can see that this is a very flat hole. So you're really not going to need elevation. So always use the take shot view to kind of size the shot up for you. I only have 1,000. If I had more than that, I'd probably clear a couple chests. Hole 4 Oasis. So what I try to do here is typically, drive it up to this second fairway similar to that. Hopefully, I can get it past the rough is what I typically like to do. You might have to back off some of your topspin here because it'll have a tendency to run out. So here I'm thinking somewhere in the neighborhood of maybe 3 bars. We kind of talked about this. I don't have the right driver in here, but the way that it's going to fly is going to still be probably very similar to this, 3.5 rings, somewhere in there. So that's how much you'll see me play. You can see that I usually play the side spin back towards the right. And here you can see that I just kind of shoot it out, get it into decent position without getting too risky, because sometimes you will have it slide along and take a bad bounce and run through. So I'd rather play a little bit cautious, even if I have to play off that second fairway there. Instead of going for the rough bump up by the green, I'd rather be in position to not cost myself the hole. So with this headwind here, it's going to take my opponent kind of right at max range. He's going to have to kind of max out here. I'm almost sure of it, that probably have to use close to everything. I'm not sure if this is going to get there without going everything. We'll just have to see, I guess. And sure enough, it doesn't. That's kind of what I was expecting. So what you'll see me do, first let's get the wind. I'll get the direction in place. 12 rings at max. You can see that I'm going to be much closer to mid, and I'm going to be pulling up towards mid. So I'm thinking somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 rings here for this shot. I shouldn't have to worry about top spinning too much here, I wouldn't think. So I'm going to maybe use around 3.5, and kind of aim right here. And as I mentioned, go about 10-ish rings, maybe just a little bit more. And here you can see the curl that I'm applying. And as I was mentioning, I didn't really have a threat of carrying that too far. However, in tailwinds, you would have potential to. So I still needed maybe even half an extra bar of topspin there. But at the same time, I just wanted to be safer than sorry, because anytime that you put curl on like that, it actually adds momentum to the ball. So you got to make sure, and you don't know how it's going to bounce off that second fairway there, that original original bounce there could potentially could potentially be like a higher bounce than what's shown on your guide, in which case you'd put yourself in a lot of trouble. So it's something you do just want to be just a little bit careful of. So let's take a look here, guys, at this one. A couple different ways to play this. It's kind of wind dependent how we decide to go. This is a very tough wind, very, very tough wind. What I'll typically do is just play up here to the right, kind of where you see my opponent going. If the wind was a little bit easier, I might try to go just a little bit more towards the green. But this isn't a very good candidate for doing that. So I'm not sure if I'm going to do that. But one of the good things is, you know, I would think that I'm not quite maxed out. Well, looks like I am. As I was mentioning, you know, one of the things that I can choose to do is go this way. However, it's going to be very, very tough with this wind direction to do that. So you're going to see that I'm going to aim over here, much closer to kind of a mid-ish ring adjustment. I'm thinking somewhere around 4.5 with all that side spin. So hopefully all that side spin is going to kind of counter the wind effect is what I'm hoping for. And all I really need to do is just thread it up through here. I try to get it right in between these two shadows. I don't like to go very long here. Now, if you want to know what I just did there, that was 10.8. I believe it was into the wind. I was using kind of close to here-ish, five-ish rings, a little bit less, a little bit lighter. So let's see if I can't get this one. Looks like we got a little bit of a tailwind. You can see this one's uphill. So this one is going to be uphill. Of course, I don't think I have a Thor 7, but I don't think the ring adjustment is different either. Or if it is, it's very, very marginally. So 7.1. The only thing I didn't test was for min to max here. There's min. I'm going to be pulling away from min, so somewhere down in here. However, we're going to need to do an overplay, so I'm going to pull up just a little bit more. So here it says maybe 3.6. And that's what I'm going to try to do because I need to do some kind of overplay on my short iron wedges. Great ball's going to take me out of this shot. Oh, another thing that I said and didn't actually do was it was uphill. So you'll see that I probably needed to be down here. It's probably about, what was that, 4/10 of a ring, 3/10 of a ring difference. So, you know, keep that in mind. Probably should have used elevation. I just kind of forgot about it. But at the same time, you need to be thinking about things like wind effect. That's going to be very prevalent during wedge shots like that. And as I mentioned, with short iron and wedge, most people don't realize how much you have to actually play and overplay. It's just as much as those other clubs. And in fact, sometimes it's even dramatic size because what you'll see is the wind effect will be stronger because the ball's moving slower. So since the ball's not carrying as fast and boring through the wind, it gets greater effect to the wind, which means that you will end up under adjusting a lot of times. So that's the mistake most people use. When you use the notebook tool, what you'll typically want to do is maybe a 5, 10. As that wind gets up to say 12 miles per hour, you might need as much as 20, 25% overplay on those wedges and short irons, both of them. So what I'll typically do on this one, this is actually a very tough shot with this wind angle. We're going to come in here. Now, I believe I'm going to be pulling down towards min, so I'll need to make sure that I kind of use this min type adjustment. Now, you'll also see that I start to check this up significantly. I usually don't use this much backspin for this shot, but you'll see that the shot should call for it. So here you can see I'm going to go right around 10 rings here. Other than that, maybe just a little bit of extra curl on top. And overall, not too bad. I'll take it. And surely enough, there you see from a pin chest, 2 epoch cards. So check that out. This is probably one of the accounts that I would actually like to get up to and actually upgrade that. There's only a few accounts that I have that are epoch 3. I'd like to get one of them to an epoch 4. I don't have a single epoch 4 account right now. So let's take a look here. This is a little bit too much of a gamble for me, so I'm going to stay away from doing that. And you're going to see me play very similarly. So first off, I want to say I'm thinking that it's going to land maybe somewhere around 5-ish rings towards the left. I'm going to go 5, 6, 7, somewhere in here. Maybe 7 rings. I was pretty much assuming that it was going to, I was playing off the right of my bullseye first off. And I was basically just assuming that it was going to go at least 5 rings for the win. So you'll see that I probably put about 5 rings into the bunker or down off the rough. And then I just played maybe about 6-ish rings for that hook based on the wind direction. Just to be cautious. And as I mentioned, you can go for this shot here. It's just a little bit more of a gamble. If you hit that rough there, you could potentially take yourself out of this hole. So to me, it just wasn't worth the risk. So there you can see an underplay. Puts it in the rough, and any headwind, you pretty much take yourself out of the hole. But of course, they give them a tailwind. It's pretty much, ever since the big update, I swear that they do that way more than not. It doesn't matter to me. Now let's keep them out. Keep in mind, I'm going to be pulling away from max, so I want my ring adjustment to, factor that in. Now, I think this might be a little bit uphill, so I might end up just switching this adjustment just a little bit. 6.9. Yeah, I do believe it's just maybe just a tiny bit uphill here. Not good. I hit a great ball. So it's going to deflect over to the side for sure. So that, you can see that the way he curled that actually adds power. So you can also see that it's coming in just a little bit hot. So you can see, he definitely had power added on there. It's because it was pulled too far back with the curl. So you want to make sure If you look at my line that's horizontal, I set it up to essentially the point where it doesn't add any power. So you have to rest the top of the ball on my curl line to keep from overpowering. So let's take a look here. This is a little bit tougher hole. What I used to always do was this shot. You can see where my opponent's aiming. I used to always aim for here. Now, ever since the update, I might change from trying to land here, because I find, well, first off, you'll see that the fairway bounce isn't always it isn't always perfectly consistent. So you'll find sometimes, and of course playing wind effect on a crazy curl shot like this can be a little bit of a challenge. So you'll see that sometimes I go ahead and try to hit the rough bump now, because I find it to be somewhat reliable. So let's take a look, especially with a small wind. And of course, we're going to be pulling up towards max here. As you can see, very much towards max. And this rough is far more fair than it used to be. So it used to just kind of roll out, not very consistent, but now it does. And as I mentioned, I'm pulling towards max. So I need to make sure that I go max. And you could also see that I probably need this curl here. So let's go ahead, give this a try. And you'll see that we can rest it up there, right in there tight. I didn't even send that emoji, but it sent it for me. I was thinking about sending him one, but he just got a little too carried away with his messages there. So let's keep going. What do I got? Maybe one more in me or something like that. I'm trying to cut these off at about an hour. I think we played about, well, I know we played at least 7 matches. And then plus that one, 9 holes. I know I have at least 9 or 10 holes here for you guys. If I go to shootout, and look here, we have a completely different wind this time. So what you'll see, my strategy moving forward here is going to be just slightly different. You'll see that I'm kind of putting some topspin on this. I'm thinking about 3 rings here, and maybe just a little bit of curl as well. And there's a great ball. Hopefully the great ball doesn't cost me. Let's see if it does. Nope, still okay. So I tried to make sure that I wasn't risking it too much on the edge there. But you can see that I'm trying to get it just a little bit farther down if I can. And you can see on the last one, I just played it a little bit more conservative. Make sure that I keep it in the fairway. However, and I was back here somewhere. Now you can see I'm trying to just tackle this corner just a little bit more. And in terms of the notebook tool, we kind of talked about this, but playing extra miles pretty easy because it's going to be somewhere, between that kind of 2 and 3 ring. It never plays, lower than, 2 to 2.5 per ring. And it's going to take, very large wins for you to be off on that using anywhere in that range. So I typically try to stay somewhere in that. Oh, wow. I didn't see that one coming. So let's see what he gets for a wind. If they give you a tailwind, you're still not, you're not dead. And sure enough, there it is. I told you. I'm telling you, ever since, if you guys remember summertime when they put out that update, I think they've done this. It doesn't happen always. But if I swear on the back end that they're running calculations. If one opponent can get to the green easily and the other one can't, that they just kind of put in some kind of, you know, win fairness, so to speak, to make sure that, you know, people stay in game longer. I can't disprove it. Let me put it to you that way. So just a little bit long on my ring play. You know what? I think I pulled towards max there. And if I was using the slider, you could see I was probably here, but I was pulling down to here, so I should have used just a little bit less rings. It's probably my fault. But again, not a big deal. But here you can see, you know, this is kind of exactly what I'm talking about. My opponent can here just easy pass to the hole here after driving it and not being able to get there. You know, I really think this was created because of, you know, too many guys complaining about getting beat in tour play. I'm telling you, I really think that they actually wrote in something that makes the game kind of a little bit more fair. So all the guys that are complaining about the game being unfair, I think it's actually the reverse. I think it's actually too fair, because I'm telling you, what I notice, it's not every time. So, you know, I just think it's more than 50%. I think it's stacked more towards like maybe 70% of the time. They're running some kind of statistics on their end. They're like, how far is this person from the hole? If they're in a certain range and the other person's outside that range, they're allowing that person to essentially play catch up so you guys can still get to the shootout. So since we didn't go to shootout here, I'm going to play one more for you guys. But just wanted to put together this video here for Tour 10. One thing that I wanted you guys to kind of just take note of is, I'm going to reiterate this. The game isn't out to get you guys. You might believe it is. I'm telling you that it's not. This is not a pay account. This is not... You know, I don't have gems. I don't have the clubs. Everything that I have came from me earning. So, you know, no money went into this account. And you can see the clubs reflect that. I don't have anything high in what I have here. There's nothing that's, you know, an epic club that's going to, you know, win me matches. So what I like to do on this one, I like to try to make sure that I bump this. Now, I am going to just put this in real quick just so you can kind of see it. 5 rings, because when you're straight into the headwind, you want to make sure, you know, and that's going to be relatively close to max. So I would assume that if I go max here and pull this off, it probably won't land on the fairway on the second bounce. It'll probably be close though. Ugh, looks like it just did make it. Now it should check up here, and sure enough, we are okay. Similarly, all I was trying to do was maybe just clip the top end of that rough. I knew it was going to be very close going towards max just by doing the calculations of how much topspin I had and kind of 5 rings up. That second hop is going to be very, very close to that fairway. With a perfect ball, I probably would have missed the fairway, but you can see how it opens up to the left. And when I hit a great ball left, it probably landed just a little bit more left than where I was calculating. So perfect ball would have probably clipped the top of the rough, just kind of where I was aiming. And since I didn't hit the perfect ball, that's why you could see kind of what happened. And you can see this one does clip the rough. Typically, more than not, we're going to pretty much put ourselves outside of range and just try to set up for a, you know, and this is a, you know, kind of I'm going to set up right around here. I'm just going to kind of set up to kind of lay up, just as I was saying. So I'm thinking somewhere right around here, and then I'm just going to go 8 rings, which is very, very close to max club. You can see this one is uphill. If you really wanted to get technical, it's probably -10 on this shot. However, that little bit really doesn't affect me whatsoever, so I'm not even really thinking about it. Like, I'm not trying to be perfect or anything on that ring adjustment. You can see I didn't even use the tool. So what I'll try to do is I'll typically try to lay up to min club distance. Now, I might have got just a little bit too close, because the wedge shot here is actually really tough to make. We'll see if I can get a small win, though, because I know I can still make this eagle. So what I'll typically do is I'll just set myself up for eagle, as opposed to trying to do some crazy stuff. And, that's kind of what, separates kind of the good players from the great players. They don't need to drive to the green to get their eagle. And, they feel confident enough from back here, especially with perfect ball, that you can give yourself a nice chance. So let's take a look. Let's see if I got out of range. It looks like I did. So I'm not even going to use the tool here. I'm just going to kind of wing this. You can see it's relatively flat. I'm thinking somewhere in the neighborhood of 4-ish per ring, which is going to put me right about here. Perfect ball. And just off. I mean, just. Not by much. So as I mentioned, I feel at least 70% confident I can make that shot. Now, the only thing that I kind of, I might have had just a little bit of extra, just a fractional difference of, I was a little bit up from min, I mean. So maybe I should have just played just a hair more than that. So if I was playing down towards min, was it 8.9? Let me just show you what min looks like at 8.9. .6-ish with this ball. But I didn't miss by much. I mean, it was inside a cup. So I like to leave it right at min because it's super easy to make that. So that's the reason that I tried to get it right to the exact point where min is. Because the closer you are to min, the easier that shot becomes. The more separation. I don't even attempt that club at mid club. So let me put it to you that way. I feel so secure from min club that I can make that, 80% of the time. However, at mid club, I feel like it drops to maybe 30, 40%. So it's substantially harder. So do keep that in mind when going for shots like that. And here we go again. Another win. So, this is very, very similar scenario to what you saw last time. Of course, I can use this tool, but you kind of already know what I'm going to do anyway, because I kind of said it last time. We're going to play the max number. We're going to play somewhere around there, the 9.5 rings. Just a little bit of backspin here. Thinking here, 9-ish rings. It's a very tricky shot to do. And sure enough, you can see it lands short, probably because I pulled the lower ground. And I'm probably going to lose this one. There's a chance I would have snuck in and won that, but not going first. It's very hard to mess this up, especially going for this rough bump. And typically what I told you is I'll do this, but unless it's a side wind, because that side wind, I actually think it's pretty high probability that I can actually land it on that fringe and run it out towards the hole. But it's very tough to mess this up. He would have to probably great ball it to the left or something, I'm thinking. Great ball to the right, maybe hit the fairway, who knows. But it looks like, and that's one of the reasons that I love that. There's no way he was going to end up with that with perfect ball, so he kind of lucked into that shot. But you can see well-played shot there. Well-played lucky shot, because a perfect ball probably wouldn't have. He overplayed the wind, and it basically came back by the great ball. However, let's talk about the alternate scenario that I win there. He would have had to great ball that left. If he great balled it left, it would have probably stayed in the rough, and I would have actually snuck it out. But as I was mentioning, when I go for that shot, if I hit that fringe, I probably get within that two-ish yards, and it's just a little bit easier to pull off than the rough bump is, because the rough bump can actually be tough. But, good luck with your Tour 10 progress. As you can see, just grind it out. Try to stay within your means, and you'll be able to win oftentimes, and be able to find yourself through this tour, and then, wind up in Tour 11 where it starts to get really tough. That's where where you really start to need those clubs, because from the third tee box, this game becomes very, very technically challenging. If you're a little bit underdeveloped, kind of like extra mile 6. It's still navigatable, like it can be done, but the shot making that you have to do is tougher than your opponent has to shoot. So you really have to just outplay them on everything, which can be, very tough to do. But good luck with your Tour 10. Like I was mentioning, stay here for as long as you can, as long as you have to just kind of grind out some clubs. If you feel comfortable, you can move into 11. However, as I mentioned, with that extra tee box, you do want to make sure that you probably have a little bit more experienced clubs. I like to have my favorite club for going into that tour is Thor 6. Thor 6 or Thor 7. I can get away with, extra mile 6, a POC 4, a POC 5. I know how to hit the shots for the driver shootouts. They're just very tough. And, like you just saw on my opponent there, it's the difference between perfect ball and great ball usually. If I hit a great ball like that, it takes me out of the shot completely. If I hit it perfect, then I can still get it to where, I can still beat my opponents in Tour 11 with these immature clubs. However, you really kind of stack the odds against yourself. So you can see anywhere up through, Tour 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, all these tours can be mastered with very limited bags. You can see there's nothing that I was doing here impressive. I kept the ball out of the rough. For an hour, you didn't see me hit sand wedge or rough iron. So, just try to, play similarly, and good luck out there. Let me know how it goes.